In 2022, Mazda introduced the all-new CX-50 crossover to their very popular lineup of vehicles, and they said it was meant to augment the popular CX-5, not simply replace it. They're saying that there's a different buyer for a slightly different vehicle that is a little bit bigger than the very, very popular CX-5. Now, they invited me out to Southern California in May of 2022 to drive the CX-50, and I did. I had one full day of driving on the street, doing some light off-roading, and even doing some towing with the CX-50. But one day is only one day, so they sent me a CX-50 to evaluate here on my own turf outside Washington, D.C. for a full week. This is Out Motorsports, my name is Jake, and this is the Mazda CX-50 Turbo Premium Plus. Okay, so what is the 2023 Mazda CX-50? Well, like I said, Mazda says this is different enough from a CX-5 to be its own model and to appeal to its own kind of market. So let's talk about what is different from the CX-5 in particular, and that is one number shared across two important statistics. For all you size queens out there, the CX-50 is 5 inches bigger in both overall length and overall wheelbase. And all of that extra length has been added to give rear seat passengers more room and to give you more room in the cargo area. Now, platform-wise, the CX-50 is on the same platform. It's a stretched version of the platform that underpins both the CX-30 and the current Mazda 3. So what that means for your suspension is it's got that torsion beam rear suspension, which some people are saying is a downside. We're going to talk about that more in the driving portion of this whole thing, but I don't necessarily think it is. It actually lets you have a little bit better packaging, which again contributes to that additional cargo space back there. Now, as far as drivetrains are concerned, this is where you're going to get the commonalities between the CX-50 and the CX-5. You have the same two powertrain options right now. You've got a naturally aspirated 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, or in the case of the turbo, predictably named, you have a 2.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder that produces 256 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque. Now, it's important to note that those power and torque figures are only provided when you run premium gas in this car. It will run on regular gasoline if you want, but power and torque get derated a little bit. As far as I'm concerned, you should be putting premium in because you paid for all that horsepower, so you might as well use it all. But if you can't get it, if you don't want to pay for it, it will run on 87. Now, these are available as front-wheel drive if you really, really want, but the whole point of a utility vehicle is to have go-anywhere capability. And going a little farther off the pavement versus some of the other crossovers in their lineup is one of the focuses of the CX-50 in particular. They all get these plastic wheel arches. They all get some slightly tweaked software for their all-wheel drive programming for the first time in a Mazda. There are multiple drive modes going on. You've got the regular mode, you've got a sport mode, and you've got an off-road drive mode. And if you want, you can even get a Meridian edition, which I've not driven yet, but Mazda includes a set of all-terrain tires plus some other small tweaks, and they say that makes these even more capable going a little further off the pavement. So yes, you can get this as front-wheel drive, but frankly, I don't know why you would, but it's there if you want. This one, of course, is all-wheel drive being fully loaded. And then otherwise, the CX-50 is pretty typical Mazda, which is to say it's pretty nice, it's pretty well equipped, and they have some nice color combos. They did introduce a new paint color on the CX-50 called Zircon Sand, and there is a really lovely terracotta interior, which this one happens to have. So otherwise, that's the CX-50. Let's get it on the road and talk about how it is to drive. All right, so let's talk about driving the 2023 Mazda CX-50. So at our first drive, Mazda really emphasized the athleticism of this chassis and of this vehicle. You know, a lot of crossovers this size are not really meant to be fun per se, and this one is. I really liked the steering feel in particular, so we're headed to some twistier roads to feel that out again for a second time, but you know, you have to deal with day-to-day driving, which is generally not twisty and fun. It's straight lines and boring. So how does the CX-50 fare in that scenario? Well, acceleration, I think, is pretty good. You know, this is not going to be the fastest thing. It's 256 horsepower, but the thing is, Americans buy horsepower because we buy big numbers, because bigger is always better, clearly, but we drive torque, and this has 320 pound-feet of torque, which is great. I've said this engine before is kind of diesel-y in how it drives, in that it doesn't have to rev very high to, you know, make all of its power and torque and to feel pretty good, and that is absolutely the case here. If you put your foot all the way in the carpet, you know, it will make some, you know, decent power and torque, but you don't have to, and that's kind of the point, is that it feels good even if you're not. So that is really, really nice, because around town you're not winding it out, you're not beating on it to just get up to speed and, you know, and merge and pass and all that, but if you need to, it will do it. As far as ride comfort overall, I think Mazda has gone a little bit on the stiff side versus competition, which is, you know, not a bad thing. They're really going for a generally sporty vibe, but they're trying to keep it nice in here as well. And I think, you know, for a company that doesn't really seem to believe in adaptive dampers and all that, because A, it adds complexity, B, it adds weight, C, it adds cost, I think this is a really nice balance where Mazda just wants the car to be good in its default setting. They have these drive modes that adjust, you know, throttle mapping and steering feel and that sort of thing, but they said the whole point of those is to really just keep the car feeling the same in all scenarios. So yes, you've got an off-road mode and a sport mode, but they're meant to keep it feeling like this, which is to say the baseline. And I think that is wonderful because the baseline is good. Like I said, dampers are not going to change no matter what. Steering feel is a little bit on the heavy side for around town in city driving. It is not going to be an over-boosted, over-assisted steering feel with a very, very light effort. So if you don't want to put some effort into your steering, this is probably not the car for you. But if you care about steering feel, we'll talk a little bit more about that here on these twisty roads. It is nice to have a little bit of a weight to it. And weight and feedback are different things, of course, but both of them are, I think, better than most vehicles that you're going to get in this segment. As far as other things going on, visibility in here is good. The dashboard is nice and low. Everything is low except this one touchscreen up here. And yes, this is a touchscreen. Yes, it is far away from me. I'm 6'1" and my arms cannot reach this, but it's because there is a control wheel down here, and Mazda intends for you to use the control wheel for most things. It's kind of like BMW's iDrive. A lot of people don't necessarily love that. I actually like it in practice and in theory when driving because I think it's easier to just, you know, deal with the clicks and watch where you're going and then push in instead of, okay, you know, I hit a bump and my finger goes somewhere else. So I like the CX-50's infotainment system. It is paired to a Bose sound system that is, I think, completely fine, very good. Is it going to be mind-blowing like something in a very expensive luxury car? No. Is it very good for this segment? Absolutely. So we are on these back roads, and these are not, you know, spectacular by a lot of people's standards, but these are the best roads you get right outside of DC. So let's talk a little bit more about the CX-50 when it comes to more spirited driving. You know, if this is going to be kind of a slightly stiffer chassis than a lot of the competition, it means it has to be good and confidence inspiring on these roads as well as whatever it can do on a typical highway. So with some curves coming up, let's talk especially about chassis dynamics and steering feel. It is nice. The steering is pretty direct and pretty responsive. I think it's got good feel. It's not just the weight. It is actually pretty good. It's telling you exactly where the front wheels are pointed. And then the chassis itself likes to rotate. Will it want to understeer if you dive way too fast into a corner? Of course it will. But for a lot of this, you know, just a light brush of the brakes or just lifting the throttle a touch will actually just, you know, set the nose and let the whole thing pivot. So it does feel pretty good overall. Acceleration is similarly very good. You don't have to rev it this high. I am, because revs are fun. But yeah, the engine does not have to work super hard. Now, slowing for a corner, brake pedal feel is also very good. Nice initial bite, very balanced, very progressive, very easy. These corners are just easy to deal with in this car. I'm very comfortable flinging it through here a little bit faster than I would in most crossovers this size. It's just easy, and that is very much thanks to the chassis dynamics. Like I said, it is willing to rotate if you're willing to play with the throttle a little bit, and then otherwise, you know, the chassis responds to your inputs very, very nicely. This is something that really pushes you to go a little bit faster everywhere if you want. On the first drive when I was out in Southern California, we had some great canyon roads, and I looked down at one point, I was going way too fast for the speed limit and for the roads and for the car, but that says a lot about how the car feels in general. You know, even when the chassis gets a little light over these, you know, undulations and crests in the road, it just still feels so confidence inspiring. And I really think this is just a pleasant car to drive overall. So, you know, is this the perfect thing for a lot of people? I don't know. I think if you want something that is very much comfort first, this is probably not the car for you, because it does have that slightly sporty edge, and that might be perceived by some people as being too rough. But if you are someone who is a driving enthusiast who happens to have a family or a need to go further off-road or whatever, where you need a vehicle this size, this one is one that you can drive and feel, you know, pretty okay behind the wheel as you get to put it through its paces if you get in a scenario where you want to. You know, for those of us who really enjoy the driving experience, I'm just glad that Mazda is letting you have that in a vehicle this size. And that's it for this review of the 2023 Mazda CX-50 Turbo Premium Plus. Thank you so much for coming along. As always, please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe right here on YouTube. Give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Out Motorsports. And if you'd like to join a growing community of LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors, head over to outmotorsports.com. We've got some online debauchery. We've got some in-person events coming up this year, both at racetracks and on the street. We would love to have you join us for any and all of that. Till next time, please stay safe, be well. See you again soon.